Hi, we're going to discuss information processing and memory. We'll begin with earliest memories, then memory processes, varieties of memory in the brain, and then in our next video we will look at developments in memory construction. Please note, information processing and memory are not only their own topic as we're discussing today, but it's also a means of explaining cognitive developments like object permanence and conservation. So for more information about that, see the information processing approach in the cognitive development lesson from earlier in this unit. That's the one where I used a computer analogy. Here's how I'd like you to begin. What are your earliest memories? Choose memories you're comfortable thinking about. This is not meant to be traumatic. And how old were you during your earliest memory? Press pause, reflect for a moment, and then when you're ready to begin again, press play. Okay, chances are when you reflect back on your early life, you can recall some memories. For most of you, the age of your earliest memories is probably between about 3 and 5. A few of you may remember something earlier. Some of you may not have your earliest memories until later in childhood. All of that is normal, but the average is preschool. Okay, and the topics may have been emotional, because emotion tells the brain this is important, remember it. Or they may have been vague sensory experiences. You may not have even been sure if you were remembering something on your own, or if you were remembering somebody telling you about it, or seeing it on TV, or dreaming about it, or something like that. What I asked you to reflect on is called autobiographical memory. That's memory for your life. And infantile amnesia refers to this phenomenon of not remembering the first few years of life. It's also called childhood amnesia. And source memory refers to memory for the source of the information. And so when we lose our source memory attached to the rest of the memory, then we're not quite sure, did I experience it, or did somebody tell me about it, or did it come from some other source? I'm going to show you a quick video clip on infantile amnesia. As you're watching, be thinking, when do we lose many of our earliest memories and why?
Hey guys, Anthony here for D-News. What is your earliest memory and how clear is it? You might have noticed that your memories of childhood are a little spotty. We've talked about this before, how we don't remember being babies. It's called childhood amnesia. You can check out our video about it. Now, obviously babies store information to learn about the world, otherwise they would never get smarter. But when do those baby memories, basically everything before the age of 3, disappear? A new study from Emory University says that it's age 7. A few years ago, they recorded as parents interviewed their 3-year-olds about multiple events in their lives. They'd ask them a specific question. The example given was, remember when we went to Chuck E. Cheese? Did you have pizza? The researchers divided the kids up into groups for follow-up interviews about those same events. And now some were done when the children were between 5 and 7 years old. Some were done between 7 and 9. Now the younger group remembered about 70% of the events that they were interviewed about originally. The older group only remembered about 35% of them. So there's a huge drop-off in early memory right around the age of 7. Now here's something interesting though. While the older children remembered fewer things about being a baby, they remembered those things in a lot of detail. With the younger kids, there were more remembered events, but the recall was very general. So memories that stick around seem to be the ones that have more detail to them, which makes a lot of sense because autobiographical memory requires a lot of detail and understanding. You gotta have a sense of self, who you are. You need to understand enough about time and location to fix the memory somewhere, and you need to have enough understanding about the environment around you. If you don't understand anything you're experiencing, how can you recall it clearly later? And a lot of the structures of the brain that allow for that sort of knowledge and understanding are undergoing a lot of change during those ages. A study of children and young adults by Wayne State University and MIT show that there are regions of the brain that control attention and strategy that go through physical changes during those years, and older children and adults have easier access to those parts of the brain. So between those physical changes and our increased understanding of the world around us, the way we remember changes, and so we become unable to grab onto those weirdy baby memories. And it's probably for the best, because I do not want to remember a world where I am scared of the vacuum cleaner, because that is straight up embarrassing. How much can you remember?
Okay, so we said previously that as adults, when we reflect back on our early lives, our earliest memories tend to be around the age of 3 to 5, in there. However, as young children, we actually remember a lot about our lives. So it's not that memory doesn't work then, but rather that we hold on to a lot of those memories from early in life until about the age of 7. And then there's a big drop-off in what we remember about those early years. So why is this happening? Well, there's a burst of physical changes in the brain, and in addition, there's changes in our understanding about the world, understanding in our sense of self, language. There's other factors that help to explain why we can't remember things from so early in our lives. Okay, so I want to run through some of the basics that you read about for today. So there are 3 basic memory processes. Encoding is getting information into storage, storage is holding onto that information, and retrieval is pulling that information out. Okay, and there are different varieties of memory. So this diagram is giving you a sense of that flow of information. And just know that it is a very basic model of memory. If you go on to take a cognitive psychology class, you'll get a lot more detail, but also additional models. But this gives us all of the key terms. All right, so the basic idea is that sensory input comes into our sensory memory. Most of that information is lost, but some of it we pay attention to, which moves it into our short-term memory. We'll talk about working memory in a moment. That's within this stage of memory. Most of that information is lost too unless you rehearse it. And then there's encoding that gets information into long-term memory. And then retrieval pulls it back into our conscious awareness, our conscious short-term or working memory. So let's say a little more about each of these. So sensory memory. Sensory memory, the content is a detailed record of sensory information. So all of the sights and sounds that are coming in through your senses very briefly rest before they're lost. The duration is very brief. So depending on the sense, it might be between 1 and 3 seconds. And then that information goes away. You're not even consciously aware that it was there. Okay, the capacity is very large. As I said, it's a detailed record of sensory information, but there's not a number to give to that. Most of that information is lost. That's a very good thing, because if we held on to all information, we would have these cluttered memory systems and not be able to find anything. Information we pay attention to goes into our short-term memory. Working memory is a major part of that short-term memory, and that is what we will focus on in this class. The content is your conscious awareness. The duration is brief. It's 20 to 30 seconds unless you rehearse the information. Rehearsal means repetition, consciously, purposely holding that information in your memory system. Okay, so it's brief. But the capacity is also small. You can think about working memory as being like a mental work table. And you can't hold that much on your table. And so if you need to add more information onto that table, you probably have to take some information off. So the average capacity for an adult is approximately 7 items, 7 plus or minus 2 items. But for young children, it's less. And in our next video on this lesson, we will say more about that. But the capacity is limited, even for adults. You can hold a little more on the work table when you chunk information together into meaningful units, but there's still a limited number of meaningful units. And the amount that is on our work table we call cognitive load. Okay? And because children have a smaller work table, it gets filled up faster than the table gets filled up for adults. Okay? And again, we'll address that more in the next lesson. And then the last type of memory is long-term memory. And so information gets encoded into long-term memory, and the duration is long. There's not a number for that. And the capacity is long, or large. There's not a number for that either. But long time and a large capacity, and these are the different types. So long-term memory can be broken into explicit memory and implicit memory. Explicit memory is conscious memory. It's also called narrative memory. So these are the memories that you can tell somebody with words. Implicit memory would be memory that is without conscious awareness. You don't have to have any conscious awareness that you did something, but there may be other indications that you remember it. So let's say a little bit about each of these. So explicit memory can break into two branches. Semantic memory refers to memory for facts and information, and episodic memory is your autobiographical memory that we were talking about before. It's memory for personal events. And so these are both explicit because you can recall them with conscious awareness, with words. But semantic memory would be like, as you're studying the information on this lesson, you are trying to form explicit semantic memories, memories for facts, definitions, names, dates, and so forth. That is semantic memory. The episodic memory would be your memory for listening to this lesson. It would be your memory of how did you feel, and were you hungry, and what was going through your mind, and all of those kinds of things. So facts versus personal events. Implicit memory is memory without conscious awareness, and even young babies have implicit memory long before they ever have language. So procedural memory would be memory for skills. So for example, even a young baby can remember that they successfully did something. So for example, if a baby accidentally discovers that when they kick the side of the crib, it makes the mobile bounce above the crib, well, the next time they're put in the same place, they remember that and they'll start kicking, right? It's, there's no conscious awareness, there's no language, but there's this memory that they're able to show through their behavior. They also remember pain. So there are certain stimuli that may have caused pain, and then seeing those same stimuli later may cause the baby to cry or avoid. Okay? Conditioning would be what you learned about in intro psych, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So the development of basic habits in behavior. Those do not require conscious awareness. Okay? And last, memory in the brain. So I just said that there are these different systems. There's working memory. That's going to be in the frontal lobes. Okay? So we'll talk more about working memory in the next lesson, but that's your mental work table. Then there's the long-term memory that includes implicit and explicit. The implicit memory involves the cerebellum. Explicit memory involves your hippocampus. And in this diagram, that hippocampus is the curly-looking thing in the center of the brain. Now, the hippocampus is involved in forming new memories in the moment. However, it is not where they are stored long-term. Memory consolidation is where those pieces of information that are in your hippocampus temporarily get transferred into long-term memory. And long-term memory involves the cortex. It involves your frontal lobes, but it also involves all of the other areas of the brain that correspond to different pieces of the memory. So for example, visual information is stored in the visual part of the cortex. Auditory information is stored in the auditory part of the cortex. And then those frontal lobes are involved in putting it together in a story, and so forth. Okay? The amygdala is activated when there's emotion, and it tells the brain this is important, remember it. Okay? So short answer, memories are stored all over the brain in the long term. They're stored in the hippocampus only for the short term and until they get consolidated and sent into long-term storage. Okay? Thank you. Hi, we're going to continue discussing information processing and memory. In our last video, we talked about earliest memories, memory processes, varieties of memory, and the brain. In this video, we will talk about developments and memory construction. So one of the really big developments that happens with information processing is that working memory capacity gets larger with age. So with age, kids can hold more in their conscious awareness. And if you recall from the last video, I gave you the analogy of a work table. So with age, kids have a bigger mental work table, which in turn reduces the cognitive load. So what that means is that their table doesn't get full quite as quickly as it did when they were younger. So if you look at the graph, 2-year-olds can hold about 2 items on their mental work table. They can hold a little more with every passing year until adolescence, and teenagers can hold about 7 items, plus or minus 2, just like adults can. So working memory is limited for everybody, including adults, but it is really small for little kids, which is why you wouldn't tell a 2-year-old to go clean their room and get dressed and go to the bathroom and brush their teeth and put on their shoes and come out when you're ready, right? That's way too much for them. You have to break things into small chunks. In addition to the mental work table getting larger, automatic processing increases as well, meaning that you don't need to put some stuff on the mental work table that you used to have to put there. Because more thinking becomes automatic, it frees up space on the work table, which also reduces cognitive load. Think about learning to tie your shoes. When you were 5 years old, every part of your mental work table was full with paying attention to tying your shoes. But once you know how to tie your shoes, it doesn't take up space on your mental work table anymore. You can do it automatically and carry on a conversation or let your mind wander or whatever. Same thing with learning to read or learning to drive. When we develop skills and they become automatic, we don't have to take up space in our conscious awareness, okay? Also, processing speed increases dramatically, so kids get faster at processing and retrieving information. All right, so bigger work table, less information has to go on the work table because it becomes more automatic, and kids get faster. Another big development is related to executive function. And I know there's a lot on this slide, so let me explain what you're looking at. Executive function is defined in a variety of ways. If you Google it, you'll get all kinds of definitions. They're all related, but there are a lot of different ways that people define it. Within developmental psychology, the most popular way to define it is that there are 3 basic foundational executive functioning skills. Working memory is one of those. There's also inhibitory control, meaning being able to stop yourself from thinking or doing something. And cognitive flexibility, which is about being able to switch your attention and your focus effectively, okay? And these foundational skills give rise to a variety of higher level executive functioning skills, such as paying attention, making decisions, avoiding saying or doing the wrong thing, organizing and planning, switching focus, solving problems in more than one way, initiating tasks and staying focused, adapting to changing circumstances, regulating emotions, and so forth. So with age, kids have better executive functioning, and as we said in Unit 1, this is a prefrontal cortex skill, and the frontal lobes develop into your mid-20s. So this is something that is a long-term development. I'm going to show you a quick clip here of some preschoolers struggling with cognitive flexibility specifically.
All parents know that preschoolers have some very odd ideas.
Tonight, this will glow in the dark, Emma.
Not, as we've already seen, about how the world works, but about what they and others think.
I'm not drawing a picture of a team.
In fact, Even parents don't realize what a very strange mental world little kids inhabit.
All right, you know what?
This is University of Toronto psychologist Philip Zalazzo about to play a card game with 3-year-old Jonathan. The object of the game is to see if Jonathan can sort the cards using a simple rule.
And in the shape game, if I show you a boat like this, I want you to put it into this box. But if I show you a rabbit like this one, I want you to put it over here. Look, here's a red boat. Which box does that go in? Okay. Boats go here, rabbits go there in the shape game. Look, here is a blue rabbit. Which box does that go in?
In here.
Okay. Let's do it one more time, okay? And then we'll play a new game. If it's a boat, it goes here, but rabbits have to go in that box.
Jonathan's
Look,
got this
how
game
about
all
this
figured out.
Rabbit.
But now Phil changes the rules.
Okay. All right, now, you know what? We're going to play a new game. We're not going to play the shape game. We're going to play the color game. In the color game, if I show you a blue one, you have to put it in this box. But if I show you a red one like that, then I want you to put it over here. Okay?
Okay.
All right, look at this. Here's a red boat. Which box does that go in the color game?
Here.
Okay, now you know what? Can you show me where do the blue ones go in the color game?
In here.
And where do the red ones go?
In here.
So what about this blue rabbit? Which box does that go in?
In here.
Even though Jonathan has just repeated the rules for the new color game, he keeps playing by the rules of the old shape
If I show
game.
you a rabbit, then it has to go
Now, the
in this
obvious
box.
explanation is that it's easier to
Blue
sort
ones
by
have to go in
shape
that
than
box,
color.
Okay?
So, with Libby, Phil started with the color game, which she plays just fine.
Okay.
Now, Phil switches to the shape game.
Can you show me where do the boats go in the shape game? And where do the rabbits go? Look, here's a red boat. Where does that go in the shape game?
Libby, just like Jonathan and all the 3-year-olds Phil Zalazzo has tested, seems to get stuck on the first rule she learns. It's as if the 3-year-old mind somehow doesn't know what it knows.
Okay, so you saw those preschoolers having a hard time shifting from one rule to the next. They understood the rules, they just weren't able to shift to implementing the new rule. All right? So executive functions, as I said, are developing through our 20s. They're a frontal lobe skill. Another big development is related to our knowledge base. So with age, kids have more knowledge. So there's more items or nodes. There's more links between those items, and those links get stronger and stronger. So you can imagine this web of knowledge just getting bigger and stronger over time. And in addition, as we develop a larger knowledge base, we develop forms of expertise in certain areas based on experience. And I want to share this graph from a classic study. Children who were chess experts were tested and compared to adults who were not chess experts. Okay? And what this graph shows you is that the children actually had better memory. Even though they were younger, they had better memory for the chess pieces than the adults did. So it's not just about age. Expertise matters in terms of how quickly and easily we can process information about those specific topics. And here's an example. Back in college, I worked at a preschool, and I remember on my first day, a little guy came up to me with round glasses and said, "Hi, my name is Mr. Squid." And I said, "Hello, Mr. Squid," and we proceeded to read a book about ocean life, which was going just fine until I pointed to a picture and referred to the shrimp, and he gasped and said, "Those are not shrimp, they're krill. The whale filters them through its baleen." And so he was an expert in ocean life. I was not. So not only did he know more than I did on this topic, but if he were to learn new information, he would do it more quickly and easily than I would because he already had that very rich network of existing information to build on. Okay? And you've probably noticed this in classes. When something is really new, you don't quite have a place to fit it in, but once you've developed a network of information, it's easier to fit the new information in. Okay? Strategies get better as well. Strategies are those intentional tools for remembering. Like rehearsal is typically the first one. That's repetition. You start to see that sort of randomly, maybe in preschool, but not very consistently. It becomes more consistent around first grade. Then come organization and elaboration and other tools as well. And they don't come in a sequence. They're overlapping waves. So as new strategies emerge, they coexist with other strategies. Okay, so a variety of information processing developments. And I just want to explicitly connect this to Piaget when we were talking about object permanence and conservation as examples of some of his work. These changes in information processing abilities can be applied to understanding other aspects of cognition. Piaget would say that babies fail object permanence and other tasks because they lack mental representation. He would say young children fail conservation and other tasks because they lack the ability to be logical. An information processing view would say that babies do have some mental representation abilities, and children do have the ability to think logically. You can explain their failure in tasks based on the developments just described. Slow processing speed, limited working memory capacity and knowledge base, and underdeveloped executive skills and memory strategies. So, research shows that reducing the cognitive load for the tasks, for example by reducing the amount on the mental work table, that reveals that babies and kids have more sophisticated abilities than Piaget realized. So it may not be an issue of logic that kids fail tasks, but rather an information processing issue. Okay. Last thing, I want to shift to doing a little memory task. So get a pencil and a piece of paper, and when you're ready, come back. So press pause, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so I'm going to read a list of words. I want you to listen. Don't write them down as I'm reading. And then when I say go, I want you to write down as many as you can remember at once. Okay? Here's the list. Thread, pin, eye, sewing, sharp, point, prick, thimble, haystack, thorn, hurt, injection, syringe, cloth, knitting. Okay. Press pause and write down as many as you can remember, then press play when you're ready to begin. Okay, so first of all, you probably did not remember all of the words because there's more than 7. But the more important point here is, did you remember the word needle? Because the word needle was not in the list. And typically in my classes, 3/4 of students recall the word needle. And this is revealing to us that memory is not like a video recording. Memory is constructed, and it's reconstructed every time we recall something new. All right, so our memories are based on our knowledge base, which is how you slipped in needle that was connected to so many related items in your knowledge base. It's influenced by motivation and emotion and a bunch of other factors. So again, not a video recording. And as I said in the previous video, memories are stored all over the brain. So when we recall them, we're shuffling those items back up together. And sometimes we can sneak in information that wasn't there to begin with. All right? So memory is really messy. And memory construction can cause challenges in face-to-face situations with friends, but can also cause challenges related to eyewitness testimony and other higher stakes sorts of situations. And we will be doing an activity related to children's eyewitness testimony. All right? Thank you.